Welcome back once again. We have got the final offering in Penderyn's wee sort of gift city lineup for us here, and this one is the Celt. What do you know about the Celt?
Celt. Well, once again, bottled at 41%, and once again matured in bourbon casks. This time, though, it's a finish, and it's a different finish. It is finished in Islay quarter casks. So it is in a sense, a peated whisky, but not actually peated per se. Any peat we're going to taste will be coming straight from those casks.
Peated by association, and there's only one distillery I know of that makes great store in using quarter casks, but that would be speculation, obviously.
An sort of verifiable rumour attests that it's most likely Lafroig quarter casks. Obviously, I don't have any official word on that. So, well, we know it's an Islay whisky cask that's been used for finish, so we'll go from there, I guess.
We shall have to find out. Now, we've seen this before quite recently. Whisky, in this case, whisky aged entirely in Islay casks in the Wolfburn full release. And so it's evidently not so uncommon a practice. But this one, maybe even just a little stranger in that we're dealing with Welsh whisky influenced by Scotch whisky.
We don't know how long that finish is. Penderyn keep the information relatively brief and concise. They don't overload you with details. So I guess that's good. We'll need to just work out for ourselves what we're tasting and not be too led by preconceptions based on what we know of the whisky. So, bourbon casks for maturation, unknown number of years. Again, possibly a fairly young spirit, but we don't know precisely. And then uncertain amount of time in some quarter casks from Islay and quite likely Lafroig.
Pretty light colour on this one, although if you think about it, if it was, you say it was finished in quarter casks.
That's right.
So we won't know exactly what it was aged in primarily, but
bourbon. All bourbon.
In terms of its, of the youth of those casks, but if you visualise it, you've got quarter casks borrowed from some other thing. They are intrinsically going to be second-filled casks, if not third. So it's not going to be taking on a huge amount of wood character from them.
So you think likely to be refilled bourbon quarter casks?
They would have been very, very likely to be bourbon quarter casks. It doesn't mean they would absolutely have to be, but I would be more surprised than not if they were not.
Being quarter casks, that sort of ratio of surface area to whisky will mean slightly more intense than if they just put this into
quarter casks. They're quite. Is that right? Quarter casks are quite funny. They're very, very uncommon. Almost no one really bothers making them these days, but they do give you, because of their small stature, a very good surface area in terms of wood exposure. So, spirit in a quarter cask, at least in theory, should take on more oak characters more quickly than another one in a barrel or a hogshead. But as for how that really pans out and whether the sort of rest of the spirit matures at the same rate or whether you get a rapidly wood-dominant product, that's really not my call to make. But
so
certainly
give them a slightly more
bit different.
A peatier finish, at least, than if they'd used a larger peated cask for that same
certainly
finish.
There'll be more peated whiskey within the wood to soak up in this case, and I think I can smell that already. Yeah,
it's delicate, it's gentle, it's not the big medicinal rock salt up the nose kind of intensity you get from your average Islay whisky, but that's a good thing. You can. I just smelled deeper and did get a little bit of that.
There
a bit of
is
a burn on there.
a distinct prickle here. It's a very, very lively dram in here, as was the last one. And this one, I think, maybe not quite so alive in terms of wood character, but
there's an alarming amount of salt there.
There is quite a good maritime character
sea salt there. And even, say, salted caramel.
The thing with borrowing casks from Islay, you might think, well, the biggest thing you're going to get is the spirit that's left in the wood, and you certainly will get a little bit of that influence out of it. But another thing to remember about Islay casks is that they will have been matured down there as well, at least in this case, assuming it's been matured down there, which means it's been matured in a very, very windy coastal place. And so a lot of that character tastes salty because it is salty. You're getting a lot of infusion from this salty sea air, which penetrates the casks over the years, and so you might only get a little bit of wood influence because of the old cask. You might only get a little bit of spirit influence because of the small amount of sherry sort of lingering in the wood. You'll get just as much salt as an Islay matured whisky. So that's where this distinctly maritime, I think,
despite having matured
quality
in Wales, you would have a lot of the Islay
that
influence, not
salt
only from
would
the
have
whiskey, but
come
from
along
anything
with the
that
cask.
anything the exterior of the wood has absorbed over the years. Okay.
So yeah, quite a more of a maritime character here than a necessarily one-to-one peated character. But as you say, very, very salty. Quite a sort of a. As soon as you said rock salt, I can't quite get it out of my mind. It's very, very salty, crunchy kind of
And
a.
I've just taken a sip, and there is peat there in spades. And we think that a whiskey that's been finished in whiskey is there's a whiskey finish, which is curious, but it's taken up so much from that. There is quite a strong peaty character. There's the predominant, at least up front, the first strongest flavour is a slightly mellowed but still quite stark peat.
That's almost quite weird. I'll have to take another run at that. There's something going on here.
It has a full and well-rounded peat flavour, but not quite the same face-punching intensity of Cull Islay or a
It's
Kilhoman.
difficult because the peated whiskey in here is almost somehow formed a little flavour compound and is holding out, and right in the middle of the palate, because there's initially some sweetness, as you would expect. There's a few sort of floral, lighter spirit notes go past very, very fast, and then right in the middle of the palate, right in the middle, there is this glimpse of. I'd be really, really shocked if it wasn't Lefroy. There's this glimpse of Lefroy just sort of goes past, and it's almost completely intact. It's really, really quite strange. It's almost as if it's there, but has refused to integrate with the rest of the whiskey.
Oh, it's like a drive-by Lefroy.
It is a lot like a drive-by Lefroy. It's really quite bizarre, because after that we come into a very, very heavy maritime character. The saltiness really has integrated. That's become part of the whiskey. And then after that, surprise, surprise, there's quite a fiery catch on there.
There's what we're coming to see is a almost typically Penderyn chili pepper spice is still there. It's been dulled slightly, but aside from that, the Islay influence has really asserted itself over top of the other bourbon characters. They're there, I think. I'm not getting the kind of clear, strong fruit or nut or other notes we were getting before. None of that vanilla and wood so much.
I wonder if there was not some design to maybe leave a little bit sloshing around the bottom of this cask here, because the influence is extreme, you'd have to say, for an ostensibly unpeated whiskey.
A quarter cask will give you a stronger,
Oh,
stronger finish.
it certainly will.
And also, we don't even know how long there was Islay whiskey in those casks for. If it's been there a good 10 years plus, then there's going to be a lot of residual goodness in those barrels.
Really
brought it out.
Quite odd, quite Frankensteinian dram we've got here.
And flow. It's a good way to taste a very big and well-rounded peat flavour without just the kind of sensory overwhelmingness, to coin a term, that you get from a fully peated whiskey.
I really don't know quite what to make of this one. This one is outright confusing. It's far more than it's not really even an influence, it's a collision, is how I would describe it. It's a collision between two whiskies, and they're still maintaining their sort of component parts. And it's, on the one hand, fascinating, and on the other hand, sort of I think a complete miss for what it was going for. It's rather than a blending of two things together, it's almost like one's sort of sitting on top of the other, or in this case kind of wedged in between the two parts of a thing. It's really, really quite bizarre. I'm not really explaining it very well.
I like it. It's a good kind of, it's a sort of a chimera whiskey. There's a melding, there are florals, there's a little bit of light sweetness from the bourbon. There's a bit of a dry fruitiness, and there's also just a duvet of peatiness just blanketed over the entire thing. It's come together quite nicely, I think. It's a real juxtaposition of a whiskey, but it really works.
Yeah. This one, I think, scores for me. I'm intrigued by this whiskey, but looking at its component parts, I can only see it as an experiment that has gone slightly awry. And so for me, I'm going to have to go back down to a 67 for this one. It just hasn't worked. It really is an experiment, and there's flames and breaking glass, and I see what it's going for, but because it hasn't hit that, it's just got it doesn't resonate in my mind. The tone is off for this one.
Whereas for me, though, this one does resonate in my mind because it's surprised me and impressed me and done things which are intriguing and fairly new in my whiskey experience. And this one rates an 81 for me. It was well above the others. I'm not a massive peat head by any stretch. I don't normally go for extremely heavily peated whiskeys, except for the lulls, as one might say. But this time, it's a good way to actually embrace an enjoyable peat flavour, but with some underlying unique characteristics of its own, and it's a good use of the Islay style and those Islay casks. Having a whiskey that's finished in whiskey, that's an odd concept in and of itself, and Penderyn have made it really work here.
So there you have it, Penderyn Celt, eclectic to say the very least. I think between our two impressions, you should know whether this is one for you or not. Certainly a whiskey which will speak differently to different consumers, which is usually a good thing. It means something's got legs on it, really. But at any rate, that's all the legs that the Penderyn set has for us today. If you've got any more recommendations for other Penderyn releases,
I'm tempted. I believe we've done port finishes and other curious finishes as well. So when I'm feeling a bit of a splurge, I'm probably going to indulge quite a bit.
There's certainly more Penderyn out there.
This is it for the sort of what they call the Dragon series of Myth, Legend, and Celt.
And we would be willing to take a look. So any recommendations, certainly send them our way. But in the meantime, this has been the Penderyn Dragon selection. I do hope you have enjoyed them. I hope that was of some use to potential shoppers out there. This has been the Single Malt Review, and we will be right back with something just a little bit different, I think. Catch you then. Slanger.